In the sweltering heat of a Viennese summer in 1806, an empire that had spanned a millennium met its end, not amid the thunder of cannons or the clash of swords, but in the hushed chambers of the Hofburg Palace, where a single decree dissolved what had once been the heart of European power, the Holy Roman Empire. A vast mosaic of principalities, duchies, and free cities stretching from the Baltic shores to the Alpine peaks had endured wars, reforms, and revolutions. Yet now it crumbled under the weight of a new era's ambitions. Imagine the ink drying on the parchment as Emperor Francis II, the last to bear the ancient titles, sealed the fate of an institution born from Charlemagne's vision in the year 800, when the Frankish king was crowned in Rome, forging a union of church and state that promised eternal stability. But eternity, it seemed, had its limits. The air in those grand halls carried the faint scent of beeswax from flickering candles, illuminating maps that showed a fractured realm, where loyalty was as fragmented as the territories themselves. Whispers among courtiers echoed like distant thunder, hinting at the storms brewing beyond the borders, where a Corsican general named Napoleon Bonaparte had risen like a comet, reshaping the continent with each victory. No one in that moment could fully grasp how this quiet abdication would echo through history, unraveling the threads of medieval legacy and paving the way for modern nations to emerge from the ruins. The collapse did not begin with chaos. It began quietly, in the subtle shifts of power that no eye could yet perceive. To understand this monumental fall, one must journey back to the empire's foundations, where the crowning of Charlemagne marked the revival of Roman grandeur in a Christian guise, blending Germanic traditions with imperial authority. Over centuries, the Holy Roman Empire evolved into a complex federation, where electors chose the emperor, often from the Habsburg dynasty, whose influence radiated from Vienna. By the 18th century, it encompassed over 300 semi-autonomous states, each with its own laws, currencies, and armies bound by the loose framework of the imperial diet in Regensburg, where princes debated in opulent halls filled with the aroma of roasted meats and spiced wines during feasts that masked underlying rivalries. The empire's structure, a labyrinth of privileges and obligations, maintained a delicate balance, surviving the Reformation's religious schisms that tore communities apart, with Protestant North clashing against Catholic South in echoes of sermons and burning heretics. Yet in this patchwork, a sense of shared identity persisted, rooted in the emperor's role as protector of the faith and arbiter of peace. As decreed by the Peace of Westphalia in 1648, which ended the devastating 30 Years' War and enshrined the principle of cuius regio, aius ralli. The cobblestone streets of imperial cities like Frankfurt buzzed with merchants haggling over silks from the east, while in rural hamlets, peasants toiled under feudal lords, their lives punctuated by church bells, tolling the hours of prayer and labor. But beneath this veneer of continuity, Enlightenment ideas began to seep in, carried on the winds of philosophical treatises from Voltaire and Rousseau, questioning absolute rule and divine rights. The empire, once a bulwark against fragmentation, now appeared anachronistic in a world awakening to nationalism and rational governance. Little did the inhabitants know that these intellectual currents were the first invisible cracks in the edifice, foretelling a rupture that would arrive with the force of a revolutionary tide from across the Rhine. Picture the daily rhythms of life in the Holy Roman Empire during the late 18th century, a time when the sun rose over verdant fields where serfs bent to harvest wheat, their scythes whispering through the stalks amid the chirping of birds and the distant lowing of cattle. In bustling free cities like Hamburg or Nuremberg, artisans hammered away in workshops, filled with the metallic tang of forged iron and the sweet smell of fresh-baked bread from nearby ovens, while guilds enforced strict standards ensuring quality in everything from clocks to tapestries. Nobles in their Baroque palaces hosted lavish balls, where the rustle of silk gowns mingled with the strains of harpsichords playing Mozart's compositions, and powdered wigs bobbed in candlelit rooms heavy with perfume. The emperor's court in Vienna was a spectacle of pomp, with processions of carriages clattering over stone bridges, guards in ornate uniforms standing sentinel, and diplomats exchanging coded messages in shadowed alcoves. Faith permeated every aspect, from the solemn tolling of cathedral bells calling the faithful to Mass, to pilgrimages along dusty roads to shrines like that of the Black Madonna, where incense curled in the air and votive candles flickered in devotion. Yet this routine concealed growing disparities. While burghers prospered from trade along the Rhine's flowing waters, laden with barges carrying wine, and timber peasants groaned under taxes and corvée labor, their mud-thatched homes echoing with the cries of hungry children. Intellectual salons in Berlin or Leipzig hummed with debates on reason and rights, books passing hand to hand like forbidden treasures. The empire's diversity, Germans, Czechs, Italians, fostered a cultural richness that also sowed seeds of division, as local loyalties trumped imperial allegiance. In this era of apparent stability, the air carried a subtle undercurrent of change, like the faint rumble of thunder on a clear day, signaling that the old order was not as immutable as it seemed. The early warning signs of the empire's impending doom appeared not as cataclysms, but as subtle tremors rippling through the political landscape, beginning with the Enlightenment's luminous ideas that illuminated the flaws in feudal hierarchies. Philosophers' words, printed on clandestine presses, and whispered in coffee houses where the bitter aroma of brewed beans mingled with tobacco. Smoke challenged the divine right of kings and the empire's archaic institutions. Across the border in France, the storm gathered force. The fall of the Bastille in 1789 sent shockwaves eastward, with refugees fleeing across the Rhine, their tales of guillotines and mobs stirring unease in imperial courts. The Habsburg Emperor, Joseph II, attempted reforms abolishing centralizing power, but his edicts met resistance from entrenched nobles, their protests echoing in the marble halls of assemblies, where quills scratched furious. Economic strains compounded the tension. Inflation gnawed at purses, while poor harvests left fields barren, and villages silent with hunger, the crunch of frost underfoot a grim accompaniment to empty granaries. Religious tolerances wavered as old animosities and border skirmishes with revolutionary France hinted at larger conflicts, cannon smoke drifting over contested lands. Yet, these omens were dismissed by many as transient, like passing clouds over the Danube's placid waters. Princes continued their petty intrigues, alliances shifting like sands, unaware that the French Revolution's ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity were infiltrating minds, inspiring secret societies and reformist pamphlets. The empire's decentralized nature, once a strength, now revealed its vulnerability, as unified action against external threats became impossible amid the cacophony of competing voices. By the time the signs became clear, it was already too late. The revolutionary fervor had crossed the threshold, setting the stage for a conqueror who would exploit every fracture. As the 19th century dawned, tension mounted like a gathering storm over the European plains, with Napoleon's ascent casting long shadows across the Rhine. The Corsican's coronation as Emperor of the French in 1804 reverberated through Vienna's corridors, where maps were unrolled under lamplight, fingers tracing potential invasion routes amid the scent of sealing wax. Coalitions formed against him, but early defeats at Ulm and Trafalgar in 1805 left Allied forces reeling, the acrid smell of gunpowder lingering on battlefields strewn with fallen standards. In the Empire's heartland, princes wavered, their loyalties tested by French overtures promising greater autonomy, whispered in opulent salons where crystal glasses clinked in uneasy toasts. Economic blockades strained trade. Merchants in Hamburg watching empty docks where ships once bobbed, the salt air now heavy with foreboding. Military reforms lagged. Imperial armies, a patchwork of reluctant levies, their drills echoing half-heartedly in muddy parade grounds. Napoleon's genius exploited these weaknesses, his Grande Army marching with disciplined precision, boots thudding on roads that led inexorably toward confrontation. The air buzzed with rumors, spies' reports of French agents stirring discontent, pamphlets fluttering like leaves in autumn winds, decrying Habsburg dominance. Social unrest simmered in cities, where bread riots erupted amid the clamor of market squares, the cries of vendors drowned by angry mobs. Yet, the emperor clung to tradition, convening the Diet in futile sessions, debates droning on as the threat loomed larger. No one understood what was coming next, a decisive clash that would shatter the fragile equilibrium and propel the empire toward irreversible decline. Key decisions and fateful mistakes accelerated the empire's unraveling, beginning with Francis II's declaration of the Austrian Empire in 1804, a preemptive move to safeguard Habsburg prestige amid Napoleon's imperial pretensions. Yet it underscored the Holy Roman titles in Vienna's war rooms, lit by sputtering oil lamps. Generals argued strategies, opting for offensive campaigns that overextended resources. The clink of metals on uniforms a hollow reminder of past glories. Alliances with Russia and Prussia were forged hastily, but mistrust festered. Communications delayed by muddy roads and weary couriers. allowing Napoleon to isolate and defeat forces peacefully. The Treaty of Luneville in 1801 had already ceded left-bank Rhine territories to France, redrawing borders with the stroke of quills and smoke-filled negotiation chambers, where the scent of ink mingled with diplomatic tension. This mediatization consolidated states, abolishing ecclesiastical principalities and free cities, their ancient charters crumbling like decayed parchment, concentrating power in fewer hands amenable to French influence. Francis's refusal to modernize the imperial army, clinging to outdated tactics, proved disastrous. As conscripts marched with reluctant steps, their bayonets glinting under uncertain skies, pressures mounted from within. Nobles resisted centralization, their estates echoing with defiant assemblies, while intellectuals advocated reform, their voices rising in university halls redolent of old books and fervent debate. Napoleon's cunning diplomacy exploited these fissures, offering protection to wavering princes, his envoys arriving in gilded carriages, bearing promises wrapped in threats. By the time the errors compounded, the empire teetered on the brink, its leaders blind to the precipice ahead. The moment the system began to fail arrived on the fog-shrouded fields of Austerlitz, on December 2nd, where the sun pierced the mist like a divine omen, illuminating Napoleon's masterful trap. Allied armies, Russian and Austrian, advanced under overcast skies, the ground slick with frost, boots crunching ice as artillery wheels groaned in the chill air. Cannon fire erupted in deafening roars, smoke billowing like storm clouds, acrid powder burning nostrils, while shouts and screams pierced the din. Napoleon's forces struck the weakened center, cavalry charges thundering across the plateau, sabers flashing in the pale light, horses neighing amid the chaos of clashing steel. Defeat was swift and total. Thousands fell, their blood staining the snow, the wounded moaning in the gathering dusk as victors scavenged the field. This battle of the three emperors shattered the coalition, forcing Austria to sue for peace at Pressburg, the treaty's terms echoing in silent halls where quills signed away territories. The empire's authority eroded further as states defected, their princes lured by Napoleon's promises, carriages departing Vienna under cover of night. The air in imperial councils grew thick with despair, reports arriving like ill winds, detailing secessions and lost allies. Francis II faced the inevitable, his chambers filled with the rustle of urgent dispatches, the weight of history pressing down like the heavy tapestries on the walls. The collapse accelerated, invisible bonds snapping one by one, leaving the ancient structure exposed and vulnerable. In July 1806, the formation of the Confederation of the Rhine marked the fatal blow, as 16 German states, enticed by Napoleon's protection, seceded from the empire, their envoys gathering in Paris amid the opulence of the Tuileries, where champagne flowed and oaths were sworn under crystal chandeliers. The treaty's ink had barely dried when the implications reverberated across Europe, the air in Bavarian and Württemberg courts buzzing with newfound ambition. Flags unfurled in ceremonies that masked underlying coercion. This French satellite stretched from the Elbe to the Alps, its creation a masterful stroke that isolated Austria. The Rhine's waters now a barrier of allegiance rather than a mere river. Princes who joined inhaled the scent of opportunity, their palaces alive with celebrations, music drifting into summer nights. Yet beneath lay the fear of French dominance. The empire's remaining vassals wavered, dispatches flying like startled birds, carrying pleas for unity that fell on deaf ears. Napoleon proclaimed the old order defunct, his voice echoing in assemblies where applause drowned doubts. The human toll began to manifest. Families displaced by redrawn borders, their wagons creaking along dusty roads, children clutching belongings amid uncertainty. Social fabrics tore as loyalties shifted, neighbors eyeing each other with suspicion in village taverns, where ale soured with talk of betrayal. The moment solidified the empire's obsolescence, its institutions crumbling like ancient ruins under the relentless advance of a new imperial vision. On August 6, 1806, the end came with Francis II's abdication, a solemn act in the quiet of his study, where the scratch of quill on paper released all imperial states from their oaths. The document's words, dissolving a 1,000-year legacy. The palace halls, usually alive with footsteps and murmurs, fell into a profound silence, broken only by the ticking of clocks, marking the passage of an era. Outside, Vienna streets carried on oblivious, vendors calling out wares amid the aroma of fresh trees. But within, courtiers exchanged grave glances, the air heavy with resignation. Francis, now merely Emperor of Austria, chose this path to deny Napoleon the crown, his decision a calculated surrender to preserve Habsburg dignity. The proclamation spread like wildfire, riders galloping through rain-slicked paths, horns blaring announcements in town squares where crowds gathered in stunned hush. The empire's symbols, eagles and crowns, were quietly stored away, their luster dimmed in dusty vaults. This quiet dissolution avoided bloodshed but unleashed uncertainty, as power vacuums invited further French incursions. The moment the system failed utterly, its hierarchy vanishing like mist, left a continent in flux, the echoes of fallen grandeur lingering in the wind. The human consequences unfolded in waves of disruption, as wars ravaged the German lands, fields trampled by marching armies, the earth scarred and villages reduced to smoldering ruins where the acrid smell of burned timber hung heavy. Displaced families wandered highways, their carts laden with meager possessions, children crying in the cold as winter winds howled through makeshift camps. Social breakdown intensified. Guilds dissolved, artisans begging in streets, once thriving with commerce. The clang of hammers silenced by economic ruin. Nobles lost estates in mediatizations, their grand manners requisitioned, echoes of laughter in ballrooms replaced by the tramp of soldiers' boots. Peasants, freed from serfdom in theory, faced new oppressions under French rule, taxes biting deeper amid famine's grip. The gnawing hunger a constant companion. Cities like Frankfurt, once imperial hubs, now echoed with foreign commands, markets sparse and taverns filled with whispered resentments. Women bore the brunt, managing households amid absent men, their hands calloused from labor, eyes weary from vigil. The psychological toll mounted fear, permeated daily life. Nights punctuated by distant cannon fire, dreams haunted by loss. Yet, amid the chaos, seeds of resistance sprouted, secret meetings in shadowed inns where plots were hatched over flickering candles. The collapse reshaped societies, eroding old hierarchies and fostering a nascent sense of shared German identity amid the suffering. As the dust settled, the empire's fall triggered profound social breakdowns, fracturing communities along lines of loyalty and survival. In once cohesive villages, neighbors turned informants, suspicion poisoning wells of trust. The air thick with paranoia as French patrols clattered through cobbled lanes. Ecclesiastical states vanished, monks and nuns dispersed, their monasteries echoing empty, sacred relics carted away in the dim light of dawn. The intelligentsia grappled with upheaval, libraries ransacked, pages fluttering in the wind like lost souls, while poets penned laments and garrets redolent of ink and despair. Economic collapse rippled outward, trade routes disrupted, barges idle on rivers, patrolled by enemy ships, the splash of oars, a reminder of lost freedoms. Families splintered, sons conscripted into foreign armies, marching to distant battles with heavy hearts, letters home stained with mud and tears. Women and elders shouldered burdens, fields sown with trembling hands, harvests meager, under skies indifferent to human plight. Riots erupted in urban centers, the roar of crowds demanding bread, cobblestones slick with blood from clashes with troops. Yet, in this crucible of suffering, new bonds formed, mutual aid societies emerging in the shadows, whispers of unity amid the decay. The empire's end stripped away illusions, exposing the fragility of power structures, and in the ensuing void, the human spirit endured, adapting to a world forever altered. The long-term historical impact of the Holy Roman Empire's dissolution reverberated across Europe, redrawing political maps and igniting the flames of nationalism that would shape the 19th century. The Confederation of the Rhine, though short-lived, consolidated states, paving the way for the German Confederation at the Congress of Vienna in 1815, where diplomats in velvet-clad chambers, amid the scent of cigars and brandy, forged a new order under Austrian leadership. This mediatization eliminated hundreds of petty entities, streamlining governance and fostering economic unions like the Solferine, where toll barriers fell, wagons rolling freely, the jingle of coins heralding industrial growth. Nationalism stirred in universities and festivals, songs of unity echoing in beer halls, beer alive with fervent speeches, decrying fragmentation. The empire's fall accelerated the path to German unification in 1871. Bismarck's iron and blood forging a new empire from the ashes, its armies marching to rhythms, Born of past humiliations, broader Europe felt the shifts. The balance of power tilted, leading to wars and revolutions. The Congress system's fragility exposed. Cultural legacies endured legal codes, and administrative reforms lingered, influencing modern states. Yet, the end symbolized the triumph of nation-states over medieval universalism. The Rhine's waters now dividing sovereign realms, rather than uniting a holy dominion. In retrospect, this rupture reshaped civilization, birthing modern identities from the ruins of an ancient dream. In the quiet aftermath, one reflects on how an empire that once embodied the aspirations of Christendom faded into history's shadows. Its dissolution, a haunting reminder of the winds that once carried imperial edicts now whisper through forgotten battlefields, where wildflowers bloom over unmarked graves, the earth reclaiming what was wrought by human ambition. Generations later, the legacy lingers in the architecture of Vienna spires, piercing the sky, in the folklore of German forests, where tales of emperors and knights are told by firesides crackling with embers. Tekoyaps, though bloodless in its final act, unleashed forces that redrew the world, teaching that even the mightiest structures can crumble under the pressure of change. As the sun sets over the Rhine's meandering course, one ponders the cycles of rise and fall, the silent lessons etched in the annals of time, urging vigilance against the subtle erosions that precede great ruptures. The Holy Roman Empire's end stands as a spectral warning, its echoes fading but never fully silenced in the tapestry of human endeavor.